Good evening. I would like to call to order the August 21st, 2023 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If everyone could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I would like to welcome everyone joining us in person this evening and those who are also viewing remotely. I hope everyone is excited for the first day of school tomorrow in district. The board held a development session on August 10th regarding protocol principles and an executive session prior to this meeting regarding legal, real estate, and personnel. Board members, with the agenda before you, are there any changes? Yes.
Yes, could we have item M removed from the consent agenda?
So you'd like to pull the 2023-2024 Janice Bird agreement renewal from the
Yes.
consent, from routine?
From routine, yes.
Okay. Put that down as
And
action.
As I talked with you about, I'll be asking a question about something else, but I think the answer will be right there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so that was 5M. Good. All right. In that case, I would now like to call on the board secretary for a roll call of the board members.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Dr. Crevecore.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Huff.
Here.
Mr. Leos.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Here. All right. Mr. Johnson will now provide us with his superintendent update.
Thank you. Tomorrow is the first day of school, and I wish all of our students, teachers, and staff a great start of the year. Throughout the district, a lot of work has gone into preparing our students returning. Thank you to everyone for getting our schools ready. I know it is going to be another exciting year, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we will achieve together in the coming months. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson. Next, I'd like to call on Grace Meyer-Smith to provide an update on student initiatives. I don't think it's on. Let's see if we.
Here you go.
You can use. Yes. We got it.
Thank you. Congratulations to Jaylene Everhart, a junior at State College Area High School, who was named first alternative for the 2023 Grange Fair Queen.
Awesome. Thanks, Grace. I understand this will be your last meeting with us, Grace, and we would like to thank you for your contributions to the board meetings and hope you have a wonderful and amazing and awesome school year. It is now time for legislative update. I don't have much of an update because Mr. Brown had put a really good budget information in his item for this evening, and so I think that's well updated already. I will say that the Basic Education Funding Commission that has been put together as a bipartisan commission to consider how education should be funded in response to the Commonwealth Court ruling has been put together. So the commission has been formed, and they have also put together a tour of the state where they're going to be holding hearings around the state to discuss basic education funding. And I will get those dates to everyone. Sadly, they're not coming to Center County at all. I think the closest they're coming is Bedford, but I'm going to be trying to make a few dates, so I'll get those all to the board. So that's all I have from legislative. Gretchen, Peter, do you have any updates from the COG?
I do. I have 4 items. I think, Peter, do you have 2?
I have one.
Nothing about the PPA?
No.
Oh, okay. I have 4, and Peter has 1. Is it okay if I go first?
Please.
Okay, so yeah, I have 4 items. One, that the entire SCASD community is going to hold in as great importance is Trick or Treat Night is officially Tuesday, October 31st, for all 6 municipalities in the center region, and that's from 6 to 8 p.m. The annual Halloween parade is Sunday, October 29th. Second item, the Parks Authority took a tour of the Whitehall Regional Park, and it will be opening officially very, very soon. It is incredible. There are rectangular fields for rectangular sports. There are lots of pieces of playground equipment. That's an all-accessible playground. Like a wheelchair will fit on the merry-go-round, for example. There's zip lines for all abilities. The surface is suitable for anything on wheels. There are swings that are caretaker baby swings, so that the caretaker and the baby swing together instead of the caretaker pushing and standing there for hours like those of us once did. So it's really incredible. We also got to tour the restroom facilities, and since there will be a lot of rectangular sports played on those fields, there's also changing areas in these beautiful restrooms that can be adapted for all boys or all girls in the way that it is designed. It's really quite something. There's wooded trails within the park, and then there's also trails that connect all the way over to Musser Gap. It's really incredible. Our community is so lucky to have these types of facilities. So more to come on when the date will be for the grand opening, but it is going to happen soon. Very exciting. Number 3, the center region was selected to participate in the Galvanizing Energy Transition Solar Center. It will provide technical assistance and support in identifying the solar feasibility of municipal, commercial, and nonprofit properties in the center region. Number 4, Pam Adams, the COG Sustainability Director, will be participating in NREL's, which is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Clean Energy to Communities cohort on planning and funding for electric charging infrastructure deployment for 6 months, started in July, goes to December. And so since one day the school district will probably have electric school buses, that's sort of a first step in the center region towards looking at that. So that is what I have for the COG report. Peter.
Yeah, the one addition I have regarding parks is that, as many members of the community know, High Point Park is being designed to be a skate park, and they just secured a $50,000 fund from the Center Foundation through a Knight grant related fund, and so they are well on their way, and they have submitted an application about a month and a half ago to the Appalachian Regional Commission for funding that I wrote a letter of support for. The full board may end up being asked to endorse something about that, but at this point they're just waiting to hear what's next. So it's great news for our kids.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we have public comment. Each individual will be allotted up to 3 minutes. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by the Sunshine Act. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. As a reminder, public comment is a chance for the community members to share their thoughts with the board. It's not a time for the board to answer questions or engage in conversation. You can always email the board at all-board@scasd.org. Is there anyone here in person who would like to make a public comment this evening? Yeah, if you'd please come to the podium and you can give us your name and we'll give you 3 minutes. Oh, is that right there? That's where the mic's on.
My name is Jessica Corral. I live in Park Forest and my kids attend State High. The reason I came tonight is in part because of what happened over the summer, where some students posted online graffiti that included significant racist messaging and threatening language. And it concerns me. As a community member, I want all students to feel entirely safe. And I know that this happened over the summer, and so it's a different scope. But Dan Rather recently wrote, "The future of the United States depends on an educated and empathetic citizenry. It requires us to share a sense of common purpose and recognize our common humanity. It requires an environment that allows every child to thrive and see themselves included in the American story. And so that really resonated with me when I think about the start of this school year, that I want the classroom educators to feel secure in providing full, robust, quality education from a very wide, diverse variety of perspectives, cultures, family backgrounds. I want the history classes to feel like they contain aspects that make us uncomfortable, because that's how we learn. And I want the students and teachers to feel secure that they are, that the parents are going to support them in feeling safe in the school, that we know that messages like what get put online happen, and also we respond courageously and with radical empathy, so that it is very clear that that was unacceptable behavior. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else here this evening who would like to make a public comment? Good evening. If you just state your name.
I'm Terrell Selter. When my son was in 4th grade, he came home one day excited to tell us about the in-depth discussion his class had about a controversial topic. I wish I could remember what it was. He doesn't remember either. He was so eager to tell us about his classmates' view, share his own, and hear what we thought. I mentioned this to his teacher, who said something that has always stuck with me. 4th graders are ready for and eager to have these conversations, if only we're brave enough to let them. Many of our best family conversations come from challenging issues my children are exposed to at school, and consequently, conversations that require bravery on my part. I am so grateful that I, as a parent, have an opportunity to hear about the complex ideas my children are wrestling with, and that they want my input as they sort out their thoughts. Our children live in this world, and will ideally no longer live under our roofs. Even now, they're exposed to ideas they might not hear from me at football games, on the playground, on the internet, and in their classrooms as they learn about history and read current literature. For now, they can think about and process these new thoughts while still surrounded by family. I'm grateful for every conversation that allows me insight into my children's minds and the chance to share my thoughts. If my kids aren't exposed to anything that challenges them until after they're out of my house, who will they turn to for support as they're engaged in the complicated and necessary process of figuring out who they are and what they believe? For now, I value every time my kids come home and start a hard conversation. This is how they learn. I appreciate our district librarians who make current, engaging literature available to the students. I appreciate our teachers who make learning relevant by weaving in current events and asking hard questions. I appreciate our administrators who understand that best practices in education are ever-changing. And most of all, I appreciate the interesting and engaged people my children are becoming as they grow up in this district.
Thank you so much for your comment. Is there anyone else in the room tonight who would like to make a public comment this evening? Good evening. If you could state your name at the podium, please.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeff Rowe. I also believe that we should have hard conversations, so I'm going to have one now. My intent is good, though, and I respect all of you. So first off, I saw last month when those brave mothers came forward and read that pornography that's in our high school, and everyone just looked and smiled and went on with their days. I saw that on the agenda now. There's nothing stating that it's going to be addressed. So first off, I just want to thank those brave moms for getting up here and bringing this to light. And also, I want to apologize on behalf of me and all the dads out there that should be protecting children. And we should be that front line, and we failed. So call the dads to stand up and please, fight against this, because there's debauchery and we're just going down a bad path right now. I believe that all of you have a great intent and you want what's best for the kids, but the fact that on this agenda, there's nothing addressing the pornography that's, being bought by taxpayers and put in our school. Like, what's going on here? So I just want to implore you all to please, wake up. This path you're going down right now, it's straight up demonic when you're saying, yeah, we can have gay pornography in the schools. That's a good thing. Like, what's going on? So you're all if you're going down this path, you're being duped. You're being tricked right now by forces that are greater than us. And not good ones. They don't have a good intent. So, again, this is a tough discussion. This is uncomfortable, but I just don't want to see us go down this path anymore. And I guess I'm running out of words here, but again, I believe you want what's best, but please, please do something at least about the porn that's in the school. I don't think that's asking that much. After that, we can move on to the next step. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Would anyone else in the room like to make a public comment this evening? All right, in that case, I'd like to open it up to anyone who's attending virtually. Would anyone on Zoom like to make a public comment? If you would, you can raise your hand at the bottom of your screen and we'll call on you. All right, seeing none, we will go ahead and move on. Next on the agenda, we have routine approvals. Is there a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
Yeah. Well, so the agenda with the item removed.
The agenda with the item.
My motion is with item M removed.
Thank you for clarifying. Yep. Yes. Thank you. All right. So are there any questions on what remains on the routine approvals? Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about item O, which is the Playworks agreement renewal. We had authorized what I thought was a pilot at Easterly School of what sounded like a very good program, but we haven't, at least I haven't, there may be an email I missed, seen feedback on it and how it worked. So I was asking about it because it's now slated for renewal on this agenda item.
Yep, come on.
Thanks for joining us, Ms. Yoder.
So thanks. So until Playworks finally got here, it was May of last year, and they trained, myself included, an individual came to Easterly Parkway, spent the day there training our paraprofessionals, trained some staff members that helped to get it off the ground, and the principal and myself. We did invite 2 different principals to see it too, and actually Mount Nittany Elementary was permitted to come and join, and so their recess paras and Mr. Feldman participated in the professional development. Dynamic professional development, really taking the emphasis of play, which is what we want, but sharing different strategies, simple things like breaking down the playground, which I thought, having experience at Easterly Parkway, having that large playground was an excellent opportunity, only to hear from them, hey, you have a great playground, but kids need space. So maybe on Monday and Wednesday, you give them all of the play equipment and then this area where you can take a supervised or organized play, but then on Wednesday, you open up these areas. And so there were only about 2 weeks left in school when we had enough time to do it. But our staff members, what it did take is it took some of our professional staff to go out and support the paras. They were a little more apprehensive to just make the changes. So they worked with them, put some just basic plan in places to start, got excellent feedback from the students. Any game that was offered, they had over 50% of the kids that wanted to play it. So whereas we were still giving opportunity for free play because that's important, the kids seemed to want the organized games that a lot of the times we were not offering. So we found it so beneficial, even the principals that were there. So like Mr. Feldman had his recess paras but didn't have another professional staff, so it was a little bit harder, and they never saw Mount Nittany L to give him the ideas of maybe play here and play here. That we reached back out to Playworks due to the Easterly Parkway's enthusiasm for it and some of the changes and some of even the games that they shared and modeled and demonstrated, that we wanted to bring them back to offer PD. This one is a train the trainer model with our deans in place. They would be trained that they could go out, and also well, you can see as a package it comes with a lot more, but it would offer up to 4 schools, so that would be a total of 5 out of our 8 schools, the opportunity of somebody to come and spend an entire day there looking at the whole play area and then how they can best re-regulate the area or utilize the area in the best so that it is a more effective. In the last 2 weeks, discipline went down at Easterly. I can go back and get that data. They did collect data and even saw a reduction in discipline in the end of May, which is very unheard of a lot of times towards the end of school.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful and hopeful.
Thanks, Ms. Yoder. Dan, did you have a question?
I have a question, just to ask Dr. Bucher to clarify 5C. It's the one regarding the out-of-state travel, student overnight and out-of-state travel. Just in terms of the size of the budget and the numbers of students involved, and the fact that these programs are they're pretty much very close to each other. They're within a day apart. So I'm just wondering, essentially, and this is what sometimes occurs with this memo, is that there's not enough information in the memo to really help me understand what's going on. So I talked with Dr. Bucher before the meeting. He said he'd be willing to kind of catch me up at least. Thank you.
Great question. Get my mic. All right, great question. So we have several trips, and these are unique in the sense that they're in combination with students from Germany that come to State College, and they bunk with German students that are in our State High. And there's about 32 students. The cost breakdown is set cost of the $200 is for the substitute for the teacher from State High, as well as the cost for transportation. So they're going to go to Washington, D.C., the capital area, also Niagara Falls, New York. Set cost there as well, breakdown for up to 32 students. I believe approximately 16 of the 32 students are German exchange students and their teachers, 2 of their teachers. And then also the New York City. And I believe they actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but they then drop them off at the airport after visiting Statue of Liberty.
Great. Sounds great.
So that's the cost there associated with that, and we break that down for students in the German classes and clubs, and then students in the high school if there's open slots that don't get filled by those students.
Got it.
And then if students need some assistance, there's a couple different organizations or groups in the area, foundations. I believe it's Sue Sheridan and the Richard Query Foundations would assist with students who want to go on the trip, who may not have the means.
Okay, so there's an opportunity for those who might not otherwise be able to afford it to be able to participate.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dr. Bucher.
Thanks, Jonathan.
All right. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
I think this one is not you. And it's again a request that when we get things like the routine approvals, the physical plant ones lately have given a brief description of what the items are before that are listed, for instance, service master, whatever, and that's very, very helpful. It would be nice to see that also for technology. For instance, there's vSphere is listed as on there. I think it's about $10,000, and I can't recall and didn't find when I looked any previous mention of it. So it'd be nice to have an item down below. And I know it takes staff time, and I'm sorry for that, but it also is important for us to know what these things go for. And rather than take time to ask through each one, it would be nice if it were just printed there. And that would make it available for everybody.
All right. Are there any other questions or discussion on routine approvals? All right. Hearing none, is there any public comment on routine approvals? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. Moving on to action items. Agenda item 6A is a motion to approve of, what did I miss? Oh, apologies.
That's okay.
Okay. So now in action items, we're going to discuss what was previously routine approval 5M, which is the 2023-2024 Janus Bird Agreement renewal. This is shown in routine approvals 5M. Can I have a motion?
I move that we approve the 2023-2024 Janus Bird Agreement renewal.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Ms. Zidney?
I feel We had gotten a report at the beginning of July on our mental health supports for this coming year, and this is one that was listed in 22, 23, along with several other people that were listed as supports we provided then, but this was not listed among the 23, 24 reports, services. So I was very surprised to see it here, and that's why I'm asked that it be pulled for some explanation.
So Dr. Bird does our affinity groups, professional development for staff and for administrators. And it's a part of our mental health awareness program and those supports, but we're moving it more into the equity realm because she's a counselor, ed professor who consults in areas of equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging. So it's coming directly out of the equity budget at this point, whereas before we were able to use ESSER funds and other funds. So we're making it more clear and clean with that move
Okay.
as far as budgeting items.
And the activities are the same then, it's where it's housed more, and that's why it wasn't
Yes.
on that report.
And I totally see why you would ask that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very helpful because as those issues of what those supports
Yes.
are, we as a board have not gotten into trying to micromanage the staff development and professional development. So I appreciate the
No,
explanation.
I appreciate that question. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Black. Are there any other questions or discussion on the Janice Bird agreement renewal? Is there any public comment on the Janice Bird agreement renewal? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes. Okay, thank you for bearing with me while I fumbled through that. We'll now move on to action item 6A, a motion to approve virtual learning memorandum for understanding with SCAA. This is shown in attachment 6A.
So moved. Second.
Are there any questions or discussions on this item?
I have a question.
Go for it, Dr. Crevecore.
It's just kind of a clarification while I was reading this. So my understanding is if they don't find anyone qualified or anyone from the association that wants to do this, the district is free to get someone from the outside. Would the pay structure be exactly the same? And if they do that, do they have to present an MOU again to us for that position?
No. And the pay depends on where they're coming from. So if it's a substitute, there might be, actually, we would use the pay structure that's in the MOU.
Okay.
So I take that back. We would use the pay structure, so whatever it says in the MOU is what we use to pay them.
Okay.
Okay?
And so would you present that person again to us with
No.
that covers it?
That covers it in the
Thank
MOU.
you.
Would they go on the routine approvals if we hired someone new?
If we hired someone new, yes.
It would show up in
yes.
the
Mhm, They
HR
would be on
report.
HR
Okay.
report.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
if we
you.
hired, yeah.
All right. Are there any other questions or discussion on 6A? Which is now 6B. Should I be calling it 6B?
No, you're fine.
You're 6A. You're right.
You're 6A.
All right. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6B is a motion to approve an MOU with the State College Borough for School Resource Officers. This is shown in attachment 6B.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion on this MOU?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Crevecore.
So did
No, it's
Amy.
fine, go ahead. I'm trying to find where mine was.
In responsibilities of the SRO, number 9, when I read number 9 and number 10, and actually this is the same question that I'm going to have for B and C. As much as I don't like people to opt out because like the one speaker said about learning from each other and asking a very intelligent question. I just felt that when we had this SRO conference a few months ago, there were some parents that didn't want SRO speaking with their students, with their children. And so number 9 says about notifying the parents, this is for a formal meeting. But number 10, does the parents get notified when this happened? Does the parents get a chance to opt out if they don't want an SRO, speaking to their child? Because in other circumstances, that parents were able to opt out for, other DEI. So I was wondering if these parents could also opt out from that.
So when we have assemblies, we notify parents that we have an assembly, and they have the potential to opt out of those assemblies. If it's an individual meeting that an SRO is having with a student, for whatever reason, they contact the parent before they have the meeting with the student. When it's assemblies, in talking with the students, most of them want to participate in it because there's education, safety education usually associated with it. For example, the Run, Hide, Fights information. When a situation comes into play, an actual situation, they are unaware of what to do. Because our SRO is one of the people with administrations that provide that information to our students. So in talking with our student government and Senate, that was one thing they felt that students should partake in. He also does things, when students are going to college, providing them with information, safety tips when on campus and off campus, and what you should look for and what you should think of. Which is really something popular that the kids like to partake in and listen to, that he offers as well. So most of this stuff is mainly about safety, and most students want to partake and get that information from our SRO.
As long as the parents are made aware of that, and if they could opt out, I think that's reasonable. But I would agree that I think it is probably beneficial. Thank you.
Dr. Bader?
Yeah, I think it perhaps is just a typographical error, but in the memo, it mentions that this is in regards to school resource officers based in our 4 secondary schools with State College Borough Police, but I thought that Park Forest is staffed by a Patton police officer and not State College, and
It is.
previously we usually have a similar, virtually identical MOU with Patton as well.
We do.
What?
It's-
Oh, I missed it, okay.
There's 2.
Okay, so it's really, but it's only 3, State College only does 3 of our secondary schools, so that's just a typo in the memo.
In the
Yeah, that's
front
what threw
memo?
me off, because the memo says these are for our 4 secondary schools, and there's the high school Delta,
Oh, okay.
the
I
middle,
see what
and
you're
both,
saying.
it accounted both middle schools, and so I just was confused, and I totally overlooked the Patton one, so I apologize.
I don't even see it.
It's
right here.
It doesn't matter, it's.
Bottom of the first paragraph.
As long as both are in the works, that's fine. I probably read it and then just forgot that I read it.
4 secondary schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I skipped over it, because I thought I had already read it.
And I think one of the reasons that we're having that is that our State College Borough police officer, or SRO, goes to all our secondary schools to provide trainings and help. Okay, so even though Park Forest Middle School, he'll go out there and assist with some of the trainings that are offered. Yeah.
I have another question.
Yes.
When we talk about the district breaks, we're not including summer. I think, is summer the SRO still working in some capacity?
When?
The district
Over the summer.
breaks.
Over the summer? Yes. At the Aston works over the summer.
Okay.
He helps us over the summer.
Because when they said about the district breaks that they get paid, I was like, the summer breaks also, but I
Yeah.
figured that they probably still work during the summer.
Yeah.
Okay,
But they do both jobs.
yeah,
But yeah, they're available over the summer as well.
okay.
All right, any other questions or discussion on this item? Is there any public comment on this item, either here in the room or, yes, please, if you'd come to the podium.
First, a question. So just, and I think this also goes to your point, but just recently there was like a tactical team that came and worked with the school resource officers that included the FBI, and they went through. So is that also included in this funding? Is that all part of the same?
So that is not a part of the funding. That's additional. That's safety precaution. It's a triage, so that if we had an incident, they would know what to do. So it's a training that they do for all the officers in the areas to triage a particular incident.
That makes
So,
sense. I just was.
No.
I guess the other thing, so my kids and I did attend the discussions, and we were really grateful that the district offered that forum for us to learn and share primarily their experiences, because they're the ones that live it day to day. And I think one of the things that we found somewhat disconcerting by the final session was there was a repeating theme of it's really hard to track data on whether or not this is a good or bad circumstance. And I find that a difficult answer to just take in. It's in my mind, it was never a question about whether Officer Aston, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, is a good guy or if he's sincere in his intentions. I absolutely believe that, and every interaction I've ever had with him has been positive. In my mind, it's a matter of if anyone in this role, or rather, if he is the thing that keeps State High safe, if he is the reason, because he is this good person and he does his job so well, that to me is not about whether or not a school resource officer is a valid and warranted piece of our school community, position in our school community. And that concerns me because he's a human being, and anything that happens to him changes the dynamic entirely for this very critical community role. So I just would like to see more transparent data being figured out as to how we can really get to not he as a person, but what that position means and does, and how we evaluate it to determine changes in the future.
Thanks for your comment. Is there any other public comment on this action item? Oh, Dr. Buck.
If that's all right, just
Yes.
very quickly, I would say that there is, and a lot of members of the community are not aware of the State College area, the State College Borough's website about school resource officers, where there is much more detail about the position and what it does. And I think that some of the communication about the role, et cetera, could probably be improved, but I know that resource is there, and so I encourage people to consult with us and follow up.
Thanks for the reminder.
Mm-hmm.
That information can also be found on our website and links.
And links to the,
theirs.
yep. Okay. Is there any other public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader? Yes. Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6C is a motion to approve an MOU with Patton Township for school resource officers. This is shown in attachment 6C.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6D is a motion to approve an agreement with Claudia McDowell for physical therapy services. This is shown in attachment 6D.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Yes, Ms. Sidney.
Who has provided these before? Is this something that the district had been providing that is now having to be outsourced because of greater need, or?
It's a different vendor. Go ahead.
We'll let
It's
Mr.
just a
Brown.
different vendor. We had been providing these services all along, only when we're required to, obviously. It's a requirement. So it's a change in vendor.
Okay.
We don't have, we could have an employee, but because the needs vary, it's typically more beneficial for a district to buy them from a vendor in this case.
Could you tell me what the commercial auto insurance, like, what's that all about, like, in their job curtails?
I'm sorry, can you?
There's a thing about that they have to have commercial auto insurance, and I was just wondering, as part of the physical therapy job, what does that entail?
We're making sure that they have insurance from when they're going from building to building. In case they're in an accident, they're not covered under the district insurance because they're driving their own personal vehicle.
Okay.
Dr. Duffy?
Yeah, and Randy, am I correct in suggesting that a fair amount of their work is dedicated to the needs of kids with disabilities in terms of the physical therapy and as well as occupational therapy, or often related services for students within their IEPs?
Correct. It would be within their IEPs,
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
And this would be just physical therapy.
Okay.
Occupational
Not
is-
OT. Got
is,
it.
is done
Separate.
through a separate vendor.
Got it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there any other questions or discussion at the table? Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Agenda item 6E is a motion to approve policy 123.2, concussion management. This is shown in attachment 6E.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? We made it to the policy round. All right, seeing none, is there any public, oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Dr.
So I did, so this applies to like all teams, so including club teams?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Agenda item 6F is a motion to approve policy 123.3, sudden cardiac arrest. This is shown in attachment 6F.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? Dr. Anderson.
I guess I would just remind the public, like, if you're wondering why we're not asking questions, we saw all of these policies at the last meeting under info and discussion, so there was some conversation then, and we also saw it in the policy committee. So we've had extensive conversations, so if you haven't been watching every single meeting, you might have missed some of it, but we have talked about it before.
Good point.
Quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yes. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6G is a motion to approve policy 209.2, diabetes management. This is shown in attachment 6G.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion? I want to thank the policy committee for this one. I know we spent a lot of time looking at the wording to make sure that it would really fit the needs of our students and everyone else in our district. So thank you. Is there any public comment on this motion, or on this motion? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Krevikor?
Yes.
All right, the motion carries. Agenda item 6H is a motion to approve policy 233, suspension and expulsion. This is shown in attachment 6H.
So moved.
Second?
Are there any questions or discussion? Ms. Zidney?
Sorry. As Ms. Anderson, Deb said, we have discussed these before, so I'm just going to repeat what I said previously, which is that I would like to see the in-school place. It's not that there's anything wrong with this, but there has been a concern in the past about making sure that students who are assigned to in-school suspension do not mingle with the rest of the population. I had hoped that we would have administrative regulations attached to this, but they're not there yet, and I hope when they are added, that is included.
All right, thank you for your comment. Are there any public comments on this item? Or any other board discussion, sorry. All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Krevikor?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item 6I is a motion to approve policy 718, service animals in schools. This is shown in attachment 6I.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Krevikor?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes. Motion carries. Agenda item 6J is a motion to approve policy 823, naloxone or other narcotic antigen. This is shown in attachment 6J.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
Jackie. Just a quick comment. So narcotic antagonists. I just wanted to for the public.
Antagonist.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
It was in the fold of my.
I know
my
your tongue got
paper.
tangled. I get it. It happens to me often. I just wanted to share that with many of these policies, in particular the naloxone one, we also had conversations about using them in our schools, and I just wanted to share that trainings were happening now that this is a new policy and also newly available over the counter. Much of our staff has been afforded the opportunity to be trained on how to use this this medication. Similarly, in our discussions about cardiac arrest, we also had some robust conversations about AEDs and where they're located and things. So, yeah, so these were really great conversations.
Any other discussion or questions at the table? Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck? Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Dr. Krevikor?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Mr. Leos?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Agenda item 6K is a motion to approve the recommendation to prepare a design for an addition to the Mountain Indie Elementary School. This is shown in attachment 6K.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
I guess, go ahead.
Dan, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. The question I have is, there's a reference to the design, but in fact, it seems that we have a schedule. There's the schedule that we're being asked to approve in terms of the timing for various activities for developing or working on Mountain Indie Elementary School. So we're talking about that schedule per se. I don't see any other material, like I don't see a floor plan or whatever. I don't see anything else that relates to a design other than the schedule itself.
So that is correct.
Okay.
And it's probably in poor taste of mine to put a schedule out there. However, I'm trying to impress upon you all that we are trying to work to move this forward so that the students of Mountain Inn Elementary School have an appropriate place to be educated in a school building with their peers. They have an appropriate place to be educated. We are providing for them within the walls of this building right now. You are being asked to allow us to move forward to prepare a design that would then give you a layout and give stakeholder groups, which would include parents, faculty, and other staff members, an opportunity to have input into that layout. So that's why we're not bringing you a layout now, because that's part of the proposed process. And if you look on the back on page 2 of this attachment, it says proposed design schedule.
Right.
So it's giving you an opportunity to understand the work that we've done to prepare for this process.
I apologize. I don't mean in any way to second guess.
No,
the work you've
I'm
been
just
doing.
explaining. You're good.
But this, and these things take time, and we want them done right,
Correct.
as we go into this. So,
Correct.
Thank you.
So
It's all good. The first time I saw this too, I'm like, we're approving a design already? No. This is just
Right, got it.
what it says, right? It's
Right.
to authorize to prepare a design.
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes, thank you. There's a challenge because this item and the next item are separate, and yet they fit together. This one is just about the schedule and authorizing you to design a proposed addition. When I went back and looked at the schedule we were given for the elementary projects 7 years ago, they seem to be able to get this done in a much tighter time frame. And I know they were under pressure because of grants and completing, but even so, I was very surprised when I looked at how long a time frame this is. Can you explain some of the reasons for that?
Again, this is a proposed timeline. I can't emphasize that enough. I would like to have a permission to engage in a design process with an architect that has been hired by you to, before we give you an actually more refined schedule. But add to that the very complex process of doing anything in the center region. Our proposed schedule, we're starting with what is hopefully a longer process than what is hopefully more a likely process. So hopefully this process is longer than what we would expect it to be. But with many different issues that we've run into in many of our different projects. And you're right, the 3 elementary projects had to be done in a very tight, constrained process. We are also now living in post-COVID, where inflation, logistics of supply chain management are very different than they were before. So this is just a proposed calendar. Once we engage with an architect and other design professionals, maybe we will find that we are able to have a shorter time period. This also is assuming certain numbers of community outreach, stakeholder outreach, and board outreach and board discussion. We haven't talked about that at all. So maybe the schedule and timeline will be able to be firmed up by building in some synergistic activities. So fair comparison, understood, but just some different rationale for why we're starting out a little bit longer now than we did our last 3 elementary projects. And again, this is just an addition and not an entire school, obviously. I believe that Jeff Straub and John Badia from Crabtree are participating virtually this evening. Is there anything that you 2 gentlemen would like to share, as you obviously had great input in this proposed schedule?
If I can start quick, I think for the purpose of, this is John, excuse me, for the purpose of what
Randy asked us to put together at this early stage of the project, we are in fact conservative with the durations of each of the design phases. I think as we move through the process, we would expect to gain some ground, so it's always easier to come back with an abbreviated schedule rather than show something compressed initially. Then we encounter other issues through land development, the regulatory review process, and then we're coming back to you saying that there's more time needed. So I think at this level, we are in fact being a little conservative and would hope to improve on it, just as we've done with the elementary schools. Jeff, anything you want to add?
Yeah, this is Jeff Straub. In addition, we actually did eventually extend to a 12-month design period for the 3 elementary schools previously. Part of the reason we had 10 months in the 2016 projects versus now was exactly what Mr. Brown spoke of. We had in order to qualify for the grants, we had to compress the schedule. And part of that was the design period. Afterwards, we actually requested an extension once the contracts were awarded to State College for the 3 grants, which then took us out to a matching schedule that we're proposing to you today. And ultimately, I think we went to bid September 28th of 2017, and bids were received the beginning of November of that year, which would put us on this current track that's been proposed. And again, as Mr. Brown spoke, this is only a proposed schedule, a starting point for discussions with you as the school board, with administration, as potentially the project might move forward with your approval.
Mr. Lees.
I remember a couple meetings ago when we talked about the boundaries and the demographics, and I appreciate the fact that it says that this can't, this is what's needed to be done to minimize this disruption, which is absolutely true. What are we talking about approximately how many classrooms maybe are being added? I mean, clearly we have a need for 3.
Mm-hmm. What we'd be looking at right now at this stage is 6 regular education classrooms, a number of small group instruction classrooms yet to be determined, and then the possibility of either repurposing spaces that are being used in that building now, or an additional classroom or 2 to help out with some special education needs. We're really, Ms. Yoder has brought forward the idea of moving the MDS classroom space at Easterly Parkway over to this building, and really to how all of that function with the autistic support classrooms could benefit from a social emotional support space as well. So I at a minimum 6 plus.
Okay.
And just, we still have work to do because we haven't talked to the staff. We haven't talked to the special education department, and so we need to further those conversations to make a more formal proposal.
Okay, and then a little bit of a follow-up. So we did this to Grays Woods. But I think at the time, Grays Woods was a community that was rolled out in phases, so we had planned for additions to that building. So the fact that we added, I forget, what is it, 4 or 6?
4.
Classrooms to that building, that was already kind of pre-planned, so it was a lot easier. That was not true of this school.
It is
that
not
correct?
true, but the work that I've asked Crabtree to assist with at this early stage of development, it looks like we could add an additional wing with very minor renovations to the current building without compromising the aesthetics of the building and the facility as a whole, the campus as a whole.
Great.
Or affecting in a negative way the neighboring playground and other athletic fields.
Okay, thank you.
But again, we have further work to do.
Thanks.
Any other questions or discussions? Ms. Zidney?
Yes, I appreciate the answers. Thank you, John and Jeff. I still am looking at, and I know we extended the elementary school schedule last time as we did the high school, as we needed to, and we will again, that will get adjusted. Even so, speaking just as an individual, I've yet to hear the figures that make it clear that an addition as opposed to something like modular classrooms and all would be a better solution. And that's why I would appreciate knowing some of those estimated costs. I'm not talking about down to the penny, but some sense of it before we authorize just an unlimited amount to go ahead and start a design process that we may find isn't even necessary.
Can I offer an idea? And just, I don't want to second guess Laurel's question as much as I want to tuck in something which has already come up, which is the question I think is about what are our structural needs going forward? I think this is the question that comes to my mind, which is like, how much space will we need, not just next year, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15, 20 years from now? And among the things that have been brought forward, even since we designed the 3 new schools, has been the recognition that the addition of the STEM program and the additional requirements of special education have added to our needs for space. And we're not going backward in that department. That may be maintained, if not even over time, perhaps be added to as time goes on. So I'm thinking about, Laurel, I'm thinking about your question, but I think to me, one of the answers I think I've already gained is that a temporary idea of setting up temporary trailers is not going to deal with the long-term need unless we're going to find some other way to build a new facility that will fill that void that we seem to have. But we have a void, and I think that working with a temporary solution such as trailers might be good in service to a building we're building, but not by itself. It's not a meaningful solution to the situation in which we find ourselves in. And Laura, I apologize. I don't mean to second guess your thinking on this, but.
Well, I would also.
Mr. Brown, do you want to say something first?
Let others speak.
All right, Dr. Bader.
What I would add to what you're saying, Dana, is that the only problem we have isn't just Mountain NEL. We are okay at Spring Creek and we are okay at Easterly Parkway, but the data shows us there's the potential for problems there. Yeah. And modular classrooms won't solve that either. So this is, layering in multiple solutions to multiple different problems by putting an addition on this building, because Spring Creek attendance area is immediately adjacent and Easterly Parkway is immediately adjacent. So there is the opportunity to make small shifts of students if that should be necessary, if we have the space at Mountain NEL. Additionally, I think we've learned very clearly in our new buildings that separate cafeteria and separate gym spaces is really critical to the scheduling of our elementaries, and that's something that was not done in this building, and I know is one thing that Mr. Brown has mentioned would be on the table to discuss and consider addressing that issue. And I know I can recall on tours at Mountain NEL, teachers speaking to the fact of how challenging it is to clear the cafeteria of students to then have the number of gym classes that they need to have in that space. It's really difficult. So modular trailers are really not a solution to our problems. And I, for one, really appreciate that the administration is trying to utilize one event to solve potentially multiple different problems in different buildings and address those and try to layer all that in together to minimize our costs and increase the number of options we have to make changes. That's all.
Dr. Buck?
Yeah, I would just, I want to affirm what Dr. Bader said and just, direct members of the public and, fellow board members to re-review what we've seen in presentations previously about the boundary study, which we've had multiple reports on, where it is very clear what the acute issue is. And I cannot say enough about what Dr. Bader said about these kind of spillover effects and that we need a solution, or at least, a management of this issue here, like at the neighboring facility here to deal with it. And, that we will be going into facilities master planning, which is going to help us understand even more, total management of the system as well. And so that is not contained here, but is in the next step too. So there are multiple long-term, really thoughtful steps that we're taking, and I'm looking forward to being a part of, when we get to be a little bit more involved in seeing what the design is.
I'll just add quickly that this is what Peter just described. I mean, this is really best practice, that we're doing the facilities master plan and incorporating all of the elements that Dr. Bader has brought up, the demographic study, so that, and they'll be more involved as well, other than just those things. And so this is really the ideal way of doing this. There are other organizations who don't take this on and end up in trouble. And so the fact that we're fixing the problem by looking at Mount Nittany Elementary, because obviously there's a problem there, but then looking at this comprehensive facilities structure and sort of inventory and what the needs will be, this is, we're doing what we should be doing. So we're being very responsible and doing a thorough job so that this will be done as well as we can, which I also wanted to address what Dr. Duffy said. It's a lot easier to talk about planning the district needs for 20 years than it is to do it, because there were so many needs, as those of us on the board for 8 years now or more have known and realized and learned about. There were needs that we didn't know were coming that ended up coming into reality that we would have never been able to tell. So it may look like, oh, we're not planning for 20 years, we should be, but I think that, at least in my experience of looking at facilities, both in COG work and the school district, this is really best practices is what we're doing here. So thank you, Randy, for all your work on these things.
I mean, I appreciate what's been said, and I think you've actually reiterated what I was trying to say, perhaps less gracefully, which is we have a bigger problem than just what's going on at Mount Nittany, and we are talking about doing a master facility plan within a year. And to me, to make a permanent solution, I suspect we will wind up there at this building as well as possibly Spring Creek and other ones. But to make this permanent an addition when we're not sure exactly how that will play out. For all we know, that master plan will reveal that we need to build an elementary school. I don't know. You don't know. No one knows yet because we haven't done the planning. But we're talking about doing an addition months before we do a plan, and the addition itself, because of the time frame, won't even be done by the time we're done with that. So that, to me, I don't know how long it would take, say, to do modulars. And I'm not saying it's a permanent solution, but if we could get that solution in place, say, by January, which may not be possible, then wouldn't that solve this while we go on to do more investigation of what's really needed and then decide this is the right thing, or it's somewhere else, or it's bigger or it's smaller? So.
Dr. Anderson.
I guess in response, Laurel, I would just say, like, we just spent a lot of time looking at the attendance area boundary analysis, which very much focused in on our needs for our elementary students and projected the enrollment out 5 to 10 years. And it basically said, we need this space, and that need is not going to go away. And so this seems, like Dr. Bader said, a very reasonable, prudent solution to add space that we know we're going to need at the building that has the greatest need right now, that is also adjacent to attendance boundaries that are somewhat, that could have need in the future. It is, given the analyses that we've seen, it's hard to imagine that we wouldn't need that space. And so why wouldn't we go ahead and make that permanent solution for our students now? Because I think our district-wide facilities master plan is going to spend probably more time looking at the needs of our middle school and high school students, just like we just did for the elementary students. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's my guess, is the focus will shift a little bit to secondary, since we just did an in-depth analysis of what our elementary students need. So.
And the one thing I would tack on to what you said, Debbie, is that the cost for modular trailers is not what it was 15, 20 years ago. There's much more extensive code requirements now compared to when we were kids or even 20 years ago. They have to have bathrooms, they have to have heating and air conditioning. There are a lot of hoops to jump through, and those all cost money as well. So as you said, why would we wait? And also, why would we spend money on modulars at that cost when we might not even be able to get them in time for the school year, and spend that money on those and waste that, well, you can argue whether it's wasted, but spend that money and then also wind up doing an addition. I think that's fiscally irresponsible.
Mr. Brown, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything to add that's not already been said.
All right.
Do you want to say anything?
I also want to remind, and we talked a lot about this, is the amount of our clientele has changed. So our needs have changed. So even with, I look at some of the classrooms that exist at Mount Nittany Elementary right now, and I don't feel we're giving them a quality education, but some of our specialized classrooms are in need of more. And this would also allot an opportunity not only for possibility of our MDS students to have a room that is really focused on their needs, but also some of our autistic support kids, and our numbers each year in special ed, as Heather Pringle has been sharing, are growing as well. So it's sometimes not even just about those 6 classrooms, it's about the different needs in the group, the rooms that are needed to really support all of our students in our schools.
All right, thanks for that discussion. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll have a roll call vote.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
No.
All right, motion carries. Agenda item 6L is a motion to authorize Crabtree, Rohrbach, and Associates to proceed with the design for an addition to the Mount Nittany Elementary School. This is shown in attachment 6L.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or discussion?
If I could just make one statement to
Yeah.
clarify. What has been presented is a cost proposal. A formal contract would be yet to come with additional scope discussions, just as a future agenda item later tonight. There would be a formal contract. It would just be authorizing the administration to begin to work with Crabtree on this project and to present with you with a contract in the near future. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Actually, that's for me, that's good news, to break these into specific, to chunk them basically, one piece at a time. So I'm glad that we're focusing our decisions in this way.
All right, are there any other discussions or questions at the table? Yes, Ms. Sidney.
Do we have any sense of a projected budget to the nearest couple of million, or maybe not even that much, or what's more than that? I appreciate the explanation on the contract. That's helpful to know.
Projected budget of the building itself, the project itself, correct?
Right, because this fee is for a percentage of that. Right.
So, in my feeble mind, I have been hoping, based upon costs of entire buildings that were completed prior to our pandemic and COVID period, that I had been hoping that we'd been looking at a number around $10 million. I've asked the question to the architects, can you help me ballpark based upon the estimated scope of the facility that we've been talking about in our initial conversations without a formal design. I believe that my number is very south of where we'll end up being. I would think we'd be looking at a number all in with design and construction north of $15 million. John and Jeff, does that characterize our conversations?
That's School Street.
Correct, Randy.
That's inflation.
Yeah, John's got that covered.
Thank you.
That's
Some of that is
terrifying.
confirming the final program that has been discussed this evening of number of classrooms, special education requirements, and so on.
Thank you. And again, those are high-level numbers.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
We just had a brief sidebar conversation, but that was roughly the amount that we spent on Coral Street
That is correct.
That's huge.
from scratch with some renovation.
Is there any other discussion or questions at the table?
Keep in mind that if you authorize a design and you're not happy with the cost, you don't have to authorize the project to move forward at various steps of the process. That's why we have a process.
All right, seeing no more questions or discussion at the table, I would like to ask, is there any public comment on this item? Yeah. If you would come to the podium and state your name for the record, please.
Hello, I'm John Kreischovic. I live in Half Moon Township, and I guess my question would be, why were we not looking at the master plan in advance, knowing that we had these needs? So it doesn't sound like we're going to get input from teachers until we're in the design process, instead of having the input built into the master plan and that being done in I guess in the earlier planning stages. Like, I'm just not really understanding why we're waiting till seemingly the 11th hour to do that, and then you know, are we sure that that's all we need? 5 or 6 classrooms? Do we have you know, have we looked at projections? Or you know, we just have we looked at these details? It just seems to me like we're awarding a contract with public funds to a consultant without giving other consultants a chance to have a request for proposal, to have any chance to give some fresh ideas of their own. Often when you have our plan should have been to develop a scope of work, so consultants can look at that, and then consultants can bid on that, and they can add their own ideas to that. Usually there's a design process when we have something like that, like a project like this. And whether we implement a design process or use it, or whether we have one that we're going to use or not, it would be good to at least start looking at it start looking at our needs in our management plan for the future Park Forest one. We should be looking at that now, and we should have been looking at this one 1 or 2 years ago. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you for your comment. Is there any other public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
No.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
No.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Motion carries. All right, moving on to our information reports. Thank you so much, Mike, Randy, and Danielle. We're going to have Ms. Christine Merritt and Ms. Yoder with us to provide an overview of the PSSA and Keystone data.
Good evening. We'd like to share with you some preliminary data that we've received on PSSA and Keystone assessments from the spring of 2023. And I want to just emphasize this data comes from the raw scores. So the PA Future Ready and the other data systems that we use that are provided by the state will not be loaded for us for the more fancy reports until November. So what we're showing you is based on the raw data that we received. It's still accurate. It's just not as, we just don't have as many tools to break it down, disaggregate it, show you all the skills and standards and things like that. And also, I think that it's important to note that we provided this data this summer to schools, to principals, so that they could use that in their summer planning for their school comp plans as well.
So in the past, this data comes in like a big bulk CSV file. And then oftentimes, of course, November is when the growth is shown, the academic data is shown, the graduation, all of the pieces of Future Ready that last year we didn't even receive till February on the prior year's data. But when we get this, we have found a way that we can break it down, like Chris said, into the overall broad data. So we can't, just to ensure accuracy, we can give you pretty solid information on overall proficiency data tonight on the PSSA's grades 3 through 8, and then all of the Keystone, but we cannot disaggregate it. We do let the state do that. And then looking at overall growth, you're going to see some growth, but that's not necessarily how the state reviews the overall growth that they produce through the PVOS system.
Okay, next one. As you look at the high-level data that we share, please keep also in mind the students who don't show up to take it are counted as a failure. Students who only took part of it, who showed up for one module but not both, again, are counted as not proficient.
So we will get our participation rates for every school in November. And right now they're showing simply as no score, but they will end up in the below basic category if, once we hit our percentage of so many students. So that will come, and we can explain that once that data comes regarding the opt-outs at the various schools throughout our districts, and where we're a little high and then where we're lower. Okay, so I'll go in, I'll start 3 through 8 and talk a little bit about what we're seeing, again, from the preliminary data that we saw. And on these slides, we were able to show the overall proficient, so that would include your advanced students and your proficient students in the green on the slide on the left, and then students who were basic or below basic would show in the red in the one column. They do break it down for us to look at the overall proficiency data in our elementary schools, hovering, and you'll see the historic, but hovering right around 70% in math, and then we do drop a little bit from 5th grade on. I talked to CJ and Chris earlier today. I do want you to keep in mind that 8th grade class was the class that was in 5th grade during the year we shut down in March for COVID. So those bubbles are coming through, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Just as the overall data. But if you look at our recovery, 2021 was that data set we talked about last year, that the students, not every student was in school, and the test was not, PSSA was not mandatory in 2021, if you recall. But then last year was the first time since COVID that all students were once again required. So we're seeing in our math what's looking like some pretty solid growth from 2022 to 23. Again, we're not positive of that growth, but we are receiving higher proficiency scores, overall scores, pretty much across the board from the prior year. In English, we have stayed consistent. Chris and I can get you the historic data for just the overall proficiency, but pretty solid in the 70s. I will talk about 3rd grade a little bit. We have dropped. You're going to see that on the next slide with historic data. We are looking at that. As you know, as we're working on a new reading resource, and we have revamped our curriculum, really focusing on foundational skills in K-2, so that we have fluent readers. And we are hoping, we were still kind of piecing that together. All schools will be receiving that, and really a focus on vocabulary and comprehension beginning in third grade as we begin to explore that. Even in third grade, if you see, I'm just going to point it out, even our advanced students are a little bit lower than some of the other grades across. So here is our historic data. Again, 2021 was the one that the test was a choice. I think our student participation rate, I'd have to go back and get that, but it was definitely lower. And there is that drop in third grade that I've talked about from 2022 to 23. But then in fourth and fifth grade, we did see a rebound on our overall ELA. Then sixth, seventh, and eighth were a little bit of a drop. But when you look at it overall, still pretty much in the 70s. I think it's very important. We've talked a lot about this. We're going to continue to do some digging to make determinations. But that text-dependent analysis is when students take two or more types of a reading. It could be a nonfiction and a fiction. It could be a graphic, or it could be a poem. And they read, and then they analyze, and then they write across. Really a higher level depth of knowledge. And our scores historically are not where we want them to be. There are normally 2 questions on the state assessment that the students take that make up 20 to 25% of the overall test score. So it's big for those. Third grade is not assessed in the text-dependent analysis. They have some open-ended reading questions, but they are not to the extent. What we're trying to figure out in this, and where we're going to be doing some digging, is, first of all, are we making sure that students are digging deep within their writing? We will be talking in the months to come, and as you know from last year, we are looking right now at our writing resource in elementary. We introduced the reading, but we will be exploring the writing with the ELA committee in K to 5. However, our students in grades 3 through 8 take the PSSA assessment on an electronic device. We went with the electronic device in, I want to say 2019 was the first year we did it. And our students a lot of times are not using their devices oftentimes to respond. They're responding on paper, and then a lot of times our teachers will have them as a final step in the writing process, put it through the word processor. So we are really going to focus this year on what is going on with our text-dependent analysis. Some of our schools focused on it as part of our school comp plan. And you can see, just to give you a little bit of an idea, a 4 is the highest score you can get. And then a 3 is, about a 75% on the scores. And then a 2, and then a 1 in the red. And you can see we're out of 450 students, we have a little bit over 100 in fourth grade that are receiving a 3 or 4. So we definitely want to explore that. We're going to be talking in our teams, focusing on that during our school comp plans, but also trying to determine what do we need to do if they're going to continue to take these assessments online. As you know, more and more assessments are moving to online, so I don't know that the answer is going back, but we want to make sure that the students are prepared to give it or to record their answers in as young as fourth grade to support what their knowledge is.
Danielle, so
Yes.
these are, in a global sense, these are comprehension tasks.
I would say comprehension and analysis. Analysis and synthesis are a text-dependent analysis
Okay.
because they have to take 2 pieces
Okay.
and then really draw conclusions and compare, contrast, and analyze
Critical
their
thinking,
findings.
in a way.
Yes,
Okay.
higher level.
It's not just vocabulary, basically.
No.
Or certainly not in the old-fashioned sense, recitation of the content of
100%
a
not.
text.
It is a
Not that.
DOK, depth of knowledge 3.
Deeper knowledge.
Easily, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for explaining the categories. I was looking at this and wondering what's
Yes.
what.
Yep.
Thanks a lot.
So, just to interject here, what we found, for example, when I was a principal at the students were taking the Keystones, is that the writing or the reading was on one page, and to get to the writing, you had to shut down this page in order for the screen to show where you could type in things. So they couldn't look at the reading and do the writing all at the same and see both.
Wow.
So that was a problem. I don't know if it's a problem with the PSSAs, because I haven't seen that, but that was one of the issues that was,
Wow. Yeah,
you
that's-
know, you
that's
could
a-
see your notes and your cliff and that kind of thing on that.
That would be a big hurdle for me.
Yes. Yeah. And we want our students to put it on paper first. As you all know, those test regulations, our teachers aren't allowed to say anything. So they practice all year getting them ready. But at the end of the day, if Chris decides to just answer on the computer, there's not a lot that the assessment coordinator or the teacher facilitator is allowed to say. So we're certainly practicing along the way. But there's different things that we still want to improve. We still are recognizing that it's something we want to focus on this year. The last one for the PSSA before Chris takes over is our science. It has stayed steady. I will show you, I mean, we are going to make growth, but we're really in the 90th percentile in 4th grade and in right around the 80th in 8th grade. That is, Mr. Duffy, a lot of vocabulary. So our students are prepared. If they know the vocabulary, they're most likely going to do well on their science standards. But you can see from 2022 to 2023 in both 4th and 8th grade, we have made gains. So that is I'm looking forward to see Future Ready to see where we landed with that. Chris.
So the Keystone data, it's helpful to know when they take it. It looks like if you just look at this graph, you might think they take it every year. And there are different grades that students take the Algebra 1 Keystone. The majority of students take it as a 9th grader. And so there were 51 7th graders, for example, 147 8th graders, 259 9th graders. Typically, our higher level students who excel at math take it earlier. And that's, you can kind of see our scores are pretty high in the lower grades. And then the 10th graders and 11th graders would be taking it because either they missed it or they're in a course that they weren't prepared for it yet. So they're taking it as a little bit older. So you can see our results here. We actually saw the largest, we'll look in the historical data, we saw the largest jump in our score in achievement in Algebra 1. So we'll take a look at that in a minute in the historical score.
I had a question before we move on. Are we going to wait till the end, or it was about this slide, the Algebra 1 slide? Okay. So my question is does it also include, like for 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, if you took it and didn't get a high enough score and had to take it again?
This would be all of the students all the test takers who took it in 2023. This is all of them.
So that would include people who
Yes, any retakes.
Thank you.
Yes.
It would include retakers.
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, because I was a little shocked when I saw the 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who are taking it. The majority of them, are not getting like a proficient score.
So do you remember, though, what I said in the beginning, that if a student takes only
Right.
part of the test or doesn't show up to take the test,
Right.
it's recorded as a non-proficient score.
Right.
And so we do struggle to get students to come in and take it.
How many?
As an older.
Can we tell, like, how many are there of those in the 70% that's not, versus kids who are taking it and not getting enough and taking it and not getting enough,
I would have to look at the giant spreadsheet to try to sort that
wondering,
out.
is that like the majority are just not showing up, or the majority
There are quite a few that don't show up in upper grades.
and not, because it seems like, going back to 5th grade, if they take it and they're advanced and then they do
Yeah.
great. But then
Yeah.
for people of the 20 I don't have the right glasses on, but the 20-something% in 9th grade who don't pass it, how many of that 20%
Right.
is the 70% in 10th, or you know what I
Right,
mean? Like, is
right.
it
Go on, yeah.
is it the
Yeah.
same people? And if that is the case, then that would be interesting, and helpful to know.
Right. And again, this data doesn't tell us, I can't go in and dig into it with this particular data set.
Right.
When all of the systems are loaded later, that's when we can
And
really
we can
dig into more.
know
Yeah, I really
that,
can't. I can't answer that question without pulling up the giant spreadsheet and counting, like literally
Right.
counting by hand. Who had
Yeah,
a zero.
but you are talking about a smaller number, because ninth grade is when most kids take algebra.
Right.
Okay, so out of the kids that take it, 74% of them are proficient right there, okay? So you're talking about this 29%, or the students that just are delayed and taking algebra and have to take it at a later year. So
There may only be 10 students in 12th grade that are taking it.
it's
And
a
if they don't
fewer
show
number.
up, then
There are actually 4 in 12th grade.
Yeah.
Like I have the number, so like, and I would have to look up whether they had straight zeros or whether they had a different score and weren't proficient. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Yeah, and that's why I asked, just because if that number of the 70% in 10th grade is like really high, then that's really not good. But if it's really low, because most of them did, because percentages you can't tell. But you've
Yeah.
already said, we
Yeah.
can't know that, we don't know that, and that's fine. I'm
Right.
just, when you look at it and you see all that red for 10th, 11th, and 12th,
It does look scary.
It's
Yeah,
scary.
it is scary. I agree.
Sorry, Peter.
No, I just know that Debbie had a.
Not to belabor the point, but it would be less scary if you put the cell sizes on this slide. That was my immediate first question. Is that possible?
In some cases, there's literally one student, and I would not want to, I mean, that sort of identifies.
Identifies a student.
Student.
I hear
So-
you. But then I guess.
But less than 10. It'd be nice
Yeah,
to know
either that, or I mean,
how many kids are
literally, if there's
represented in
only
it.
one student, there is no point in a bar graph that says.
Right.
They're
And
in
in
the
fact, there
notes.
can't be
Yeah.
only one student if it's not 0 or 100%.
Yeah.
So in fact, for at least on the, right, by definition, if there was only one, it would be either 0 or 100%. Because they either passed it or they didn't.
Right.
So it just would, I knew exactly what you meant by the top, but the nuance of the small cell sizes was not there. The other thing is, I just cannot remember, did last year's seniors have to pass the Keystones to graduate?
They had to have a pathway. So
They did
you
have
do-
to have a
yes,
pathway.
You don't
Okay.
have to pass the Keystones to graduate.
Right, but for example, 2 years ago, they didn't need to even have a pathway.
Correct.
Correct.
So, okay, so moving forward, it matters more, but some of these kids that took that exam as a 12th grader maybe already had another pathway.
Correct.
And when they took it the first time, they might have thought they wouldn't need to pass it because the state kept
Correct.
delaying when you would
You
need
are
to pass
correct.
it.
You are correct.
So,
Yes.
kids being kids, they probably weren't taking it super seriously at the beginning. Going forward,
I think we'll see, I think we see an uptick in our scores, and part of that is sort of the.
recognizing that it
necessity
matters now,
for
it really
them.
does matter now.
It's a simpler path for them if
Yeah.
they.
Just
pass
an
the
easier
exam.
path.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
But it's also the case that you just need to have correct me if I'm wrong, a combined score for your Keystones, all
Correct.
three.
Right, there's, the first two
So
pathways have to
They could
do
still
with.
have not proficient
Right.
and then pass their Keystones.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
yep,
But it's very close to being proficient. I mean,
it is pretty close.
it's pretty close.
You can't be below basic in any Keystone. So the next one is biology. In biology, the vast majority of our students take it as a 10th grader. 529 students took it as 10th graders. And you can see that we have 81% proficiency. There were 65 ninth graders, and those are students, again, who have an accelerated math course, usually pair that with accelerated science. And 65 11th graders took or retook it, just to give you a sense of the numbers. So 529, really paying attention to grade 10, where the bulk of our students take that exam. Okay, and then we have saving the best for last. Former English teacher. We had 500, again, 10th grade is where the vast majority of students take this exam. 563 10th graders took the Literature Keystone, and I'm pretty excited to see that 88% proficiency rate there. Okay, and 48 11th graders, if you're wondering. And again, the other grades are so small, I'm not calling out their sample size. Kind of identifies the students. The historical data chart, you can see we've made gains. We're coming back sort of from the pandemic, if you want to say. And Danielle already explained sort of the history, how in 2021, a lot of the exams were optional, so a lot of people chose not to take them. We did see the largest growth in Algebra 1, about 11, almost a 12%. According to this raw data, about a 12% jump. So that was pretty interesting. We'll see when they add all of our scores together, like what they actually calculate that as. But according to this raw data, it's the largest increase. The last slide, as we said, we reviewed the PSSA preliminary data and shared it with all of the principals, so they had a chance to formulate their school comp plans using some of this data if they saw the need. And PLCs and MTSS core academic teams continuously review data, this and others, to respond to the needs of all students. We did identify through our initial look at data that our virtual academy students' participation is something we want to really work on for next year. We're finding that a lot of our VA students don't come in to take the Keystone or PSSA. So we end up with sort of getting dinged, if you want to say, for participation there because they don't come in and take it. So, communicating with them or making arrangements to take that test in a more friendly kind of way will be one of our areas of growth. We're also continuing to work with our administrative team as we look at data and respond to it to make sure that our curriculum is taught with integrity, fidelity, and consistency.
So you don't have to take the Keystone to graduate?
There are other pathways that you can take.
Is that what the VA kids are doing?
Yep. You have to pass a trigger course. So if you've passed Algebra 1, Biology, and 10th grade English, and then there are other things you have to do on the other pathways. So you could just not use a Keystone pathway. But you have to pass the trigger courses. That's the key.
Right, and that's what the VA students are opting to choose to do instead of taking the Keystone.
Yeah.
Or there's the superintendent has a certain percentage that he can override on. But it's only a certain percentage I can't go over without creating a needs improvement plan
5%.
for the district. So, and that's usually for our more
Special dispensation.
If we have a student who moved here from another state in their senior year and didn't take the tests and the courses, that might fall into the waiver. So, yeah.
All right, any other questions at the table for, Mr. Lewis?
Sorry, I've been saving them up. Thanks. No, under the text-dependent analysis, is this is called out, it's part of the PSSAs?
Correct.
And how long has this been sort of given a separate score?
Oh, since they developed
Okay.
it. So when the test was revised, 2015.
Okay.
I want to say, I could be off on that ballpark. They implemented the text-dependent analysis beginning in 4th grade, and that was really the comparing. So it's comparing two documents. Like I said, it might even be like a recipe. Not that I've ever. There are released items that you can look at, and it might be like a recipe and then a story about somebody that cooks. And then the question would be, figuring out how they're connected and being able to respond to that.
Okay, because the reason I asked that is for my question, is there any indication, so since 2015, so we would have scores before we added academic literacy? Or is that right about the time we added academic
We
literacy?
could go
to
back.
it?
We added academic literacy shortly after this. It was
Okay.
After this.
So we don't really have that good a baseline. My question would be, is there evidence that that's improved the scores? And, because it seems like that's a lot of what academic literacy is about.
Our scores have gone up a little bit and then down a little bit. Again, the pandemic related
Yeah.
stuff. So it's
Yeah.
they're not up tremendously
Okay. Okay.
Well, that-
And then.
in TDA. In TDA.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess I would ask the same question around the science scores in terms of, we've added the STEM curriculum at the elementary level. Is there a noticeable improvement since we added that?
I'll go back and find those. Our science has continued, and that's that
Yeah.
one slide. It has really continued to grow. Now, it has been steady. Again, it's a lot of vocabulary. It's pretty rich vocabulary, and you can, if you're a struggling reader, you can have parts of the science test read to you, which is nice, because then you're really getting to the content. The science test also hasn't changed. When they updated all of the standards and they moved to a different math and ELA, the science PSSA pretty much stayed the same from the early years of the PSSAs. Not saying it's any easier. It was just it was a test created at a different time.
Okay, so then, yeah, so I guess then my question would stand there. Is there any evidence that the STEM
The
curriculum?
STEM. So we'll take, I mean, we can take a look, because STEM
improved?
was brought here in 1819. So we would have to look at prior to 1819.
Okay. Great, no, that's good. And then, so when we're talking about the algebra scores, and I think you indicated that on some of these, the N is too low, because I was wondering why the N's weren't there, but the N is too low in maybe 11th grade and 12th grade, that you could identify individual
Correct.
students or, okay.
Correct.
And then,
Three or one or two.
yeah.
Yeah. That's
Okay,
why they're not on.
that's understandable, yeah, okay. And then the area of improvement in the virtual academy. So the virtual academy, the students, choose that option, right? So
Right.
they don't have to come in. So it shouldn't surprise us that they don't want to come in to take the test. Have we looked into, or maybe the state doesn't allow this, a virtual proctoring service?
They do
They do
not.
not.
You
Okay.
must come into a school. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be your home school. It has to be a school within State College Area School District. So they
Okay.
can choose a school. They do not allow any virtual assessments, even though the test is online.
Because even on some state certifications, they allow that now, that you can do a virtual proctor service. Because it seems to me that if that were provided, that would, probably incentivize more virtual academy students
Yeah.
to take the test virtually.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I had. Thanks.
Do any virtual academy students come in to take the? They do, okay.
Some in elementary. We have a large opt-out in elementary, though, too.
Dr. Duffy?
Yeah, the only request I would have, in addition to the things we talked about before, to the extent that we can identify the numbers of students associated with these percentages would be great. However you wish to do that, it would make these bar charts more meaningful. The other thing I think that comes to mind is for those who are not participating, the under-participating numbers, to put those, even if they're side by side with the numbers of kids who are actually scoring at below basic, for example, it'd be nice to know what percentage of the kids who are scoring below basic happen to be non-participants in relation to the remaining students involved.
Yeah, and again, once we get the data system loaded, it's a lot easier to
It's
show
easier to
you
do that,
reports.
okay.
This
Well,
is this is all like very rudimentary, very
got it, okay.
simplistic, high-level raw data.
Got
Yeah.
it, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So they're keeping it a secret. Stay
Yeah.
tuned, wait until
Yeah.
November when we're
Yeah.
going to release.
But we did want to show you as soon as we got it. I mean, we had
know,
it,
but
and we
I
wanted
meant-
to give
I
you a
meant PDE.
sense of where we're at, so.
Thank you.
Just realized that we're going to be looking at data more closely and analyze it, and to see how we can grow our curriculum, what impacts our curriculum is having on the data. and looking at a building level and seeing what they're doing. So this is granular, but we will be diving down. Like I said, they said we'll be sharing this information with the building levels, and they'll be looking at their data to figure out how they can best utilize this information.
Great, thank you.
And again, I would make a comment that I make every year, is why can't we get this data faster? I mean,
Well,
it
and-
seems to me that the lag, so it's good that you use the preliminary data to inform the comprehensive plans, but why can't we get it earlier?
So our students took this test and finished, I think, May 5th. We had the raw data by June that we were able to dispense to our teachers. I agree with you. And then it all sits, and they do this, I don't know, they do a checks and balance. We did have to submit, so we added an early release in June, and then I think the first week in July for PSSA, we got what was considered the corrected raw data in another CSV. But you're right, we're getting bits and early bits and pieces of future ready that we have to review. But last year it was supposed to be November, and it never came till February. So it
And
is.
so there's almost a whole year
Correct.
planning lag because of
Correct.
that, right?
Yeah, so that's why we
frustrating.
decided to move
Yeah.
forward with this, disaggregate what
no,
we
that's
could,
great.
so that schools could at least focus on overall areas for their school comprehensive plans.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
Correct.
I just want to say thank you. I mean, I know that this is raw data, but it's so helpful, and I know that you made an effort that you could share that with us and with the schools, and thank you to Mr. Johnson for focusing on the data and eventually getting it to the building level. And this is really exciting that we're focusing on data.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, next we have Linda Pierce is now going to join us to provide an overview of several policy updates. So we hit the bonus policy round tonight. All right, Linda, I'm so sorry. I'm going to take a recess for 5 minutes. When you hear the DJ alarm, that means you have 1 minute to get back to the table. All right, I'd like to welcome you back to the board meeting. Whatever this is, I know. It's August 21st, board meeting. We have Ms. Linda Pierce here with us to go over an overview of several policy updates. So should we just go in order? All right.
I think that'd be great. So the first one up then is 117, homebound instruction. Again, as with many of what we've been presenting to you, these are edits suggested by PSBA. The committee reviewed it, and I mean, it's pretty much, I don't want to say it's boilerplate, but it's pretty much short and brief and to the point.
Are there any questions on this policy 117? Okay, let's bring it for action.
Bring it for action next month. Then we have policy 200.
Yes.
Enrollment in the district. Again, changes recommended by PSBA. Nothing really startling or new.
Yeah, really just a few changes to inclusive language and, yeah.
Yeah, and the part about that it has to be published in the policy has to publish in the handbooks and sent out to the community. That part was new at the end, but yeah, pretty simple.
Are there any questions from the board on policy 200? All right, let's bring that one for action.
All right, then we go to 249, bullying, cyberbullying. Again, it's another update to an existing policy.
And just to add, it's mentioned Title IX in here and our other harassment. This is not an all-inclusive. It works in conjunction with our other anti-discrimination policies and things like
right.
that. So just keep in mind that this is not going to cover every fine nuance.
And the safe to say language is new about it, because that wasn't around when,
Correct.
Okay.
Well, the last time we
yeah,
did it,
last time we revised it.
which was, I'm not sure.
And it seems to be getting more clear about school setting and non-school setting, too.
That's right.
Correct.
So.
That carries through with all of the discriminatory type laws.
Right, yeah, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Sidney.
On page 2 under authority, we say, it says that the board encourages students to report, and students are encouraged to put the complaint in writing, which is excellent, and I'm all for encouraging student agency. I also am concerned that if a parent heard from a child, I'm being bullied, and looked at this, there are parents who might think, well, if my child is not capable or willing to report it, then that's the end of it. I can't report it. I think this would be stronger if we specifically mentioned that others are permitted to report when they believe there has been bullying.
Just for, maybe you didn't see it, but in the paragraph above that, it says that if students report such incidents to someone other than those indicated, that individual should immediately report such incidents to the building principal.
Right, but
You think
You're right.
calling out parents specifically would be
yeah,
useful?
I think that, to me, when I read that, I assumed it meant someone at the school, other like a teacher or so. I assumed that it was applying to a school setting, not somebody's aunt or parent or babysitter or something. So you're right, that could be interpreted that way. But to me, given the context, I was assuming it meant someone in the building other than those people.
If you think about it, in that reference to referring to the building principal precedes the parenthetical sentence. And the parenthetical sentence then you think would not be modifying the reference to the building principal or somebody inside the system. There's not a way to really, for somebody who's reading this as an outsider, to feel that a family member would be empowered to be in touch with the school administrator. Even though we've done this before, I apologize, I don't think we did this before in a committee meeting, but just to become.
We had talked about it some, and I remember Mr. Johnson, alluding to a lot of the language in the student handbook, kind of addressed some of those concerns about how parents play a role.
When we send out information about Safe to Say, anyone can fill out those reports, even parents, aunts, or aunts. So anyone. It's not in the policy, but that's something that is sent out to all parents about that information.
So I'm right now looking at 103.1, which is the Title IX policy. Under reporting, we do say the district encourages anyone to make a good faith report, yada, 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 yada. If there would be interest in including that language in the bullying, cyberbullying.
I was just going to say, another simple way could just be under authority. I guess it's the third paragraph, but the first paragraph is a single sentence. So anyway, we could just say students or parents are encouraged to put the complaint in writing by utilizing Safe to Say. I mean, that would name the parents if that is the main concern. Like I as a parent would just report it, but I understand that not all parents would feel the same level of comfort. So I'm not opposed to putting some language in there that would make it more clear. So that was going to be my suggestion for a simple way to do it.
Can parents use Safe to Say?
Anyone.
Okay.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, I
don't
think that modification will be fine.
That's fine. I mean, I'm not.
So
It's a
the
simple
board is suggesting to add and parents. Am I correct?
Or
Or
guardian.
Or
Students
parents.
or parents are encouraged to
Parents
put
or
the
guardian.
complaint in
Parent
writing.
/ guardian too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Is that?
Anything else?
So with that modification, are we okay to bring it for action? All right.
And the next one is 255, educational stability for children in foster care. This is a new policy based on ESSA. And it just talks about what our obligations are, obviously, in a lot of words.
Is there any question or discussion on policy 255? All right.
Good. 317, conduct disciplinary procedures. Again, just a reminder that we're taking all the 300, 400, 500s, smush them into all the 300s. So this is conduct disciplinary procedures for employees. Obviously, it's rather brief because we do have collective bargaining agreements, we have handbooks, we have multiple documents that give specific information.
All right. Are there any questions on policy 317?
right. Okay. Oh, now we have the good
Our
one.
favorite.
Drones. You're with us in case we have questions, right, Justin?
Yep.
So we took the comments under serious consideration and basically almost rewrote it. We did not want to talk about the specific size or specific weight of the objects because what we are proposing for the board is that we forbid the use of any flying object over district property.
Without approval.
Without previous approval for the appropriate role, yada, yada, yada. But we didn't want to get into a whole series of if it's this big and that big, or this fast and that fast, or whatever. So we took much of that descriptive language out. We talked about educational purposes, district employees operating them for educational purposes, students flying them for educational purposes, and we also have non-educational purposes. It could be at some point, Michael want to fly a drone over the roof of Park Forest Middle School. So we included
For
that.
inspection, like, yeah. Somebody had a confused face, like to inspect the roof, using drones to
Yeah,
inspect
yeah.
property.
So that's why we included the non-educational section. So, like I said, we took your comments under good advisement and made a bunch of changes. Are there any questions with what we did?
So I'm still trying to understand. There is this remote pilot license that the FAA requires for some things, right? But not for other things.
Depending on the actual vehicle, the drone.
Right. But if I toss a paper airplane or something, even one with a little battery, that's not required, does not require that type of license.
The FAA does not, yes.
Right. I thought, as we've talked about this over time, that we were primarily referring to those vehicles that require that type of permit. And so that if the FAA raised the weight limit to 65, it would be 65. And if it was 85, it would be 85. And if they put a bottom weight, it would be the bottom weight. But at this point, there are some things that don't require that.
Correct.
And I'm trying to understand, do we have a problem with those things being flown over the district?
Well, the discussion at the Policy Development Committee had to do with groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody decided to fly a drone over Memorial Field during a football game, if somebody decided to fly a drone over any one of our other fields during an athletic event. And that could be something that you buy at the Five and Dime store. I just stated myself. I said Five and Dime store.
Hey, I'm doing paper airplanes, so.
I loved the Five and Dime.
I know.
It's a good place.
And I think one of the things that we talked about is what the regulations are at other areas, such as Penn State Parks and Recs, state parks. So,
Yeah.
in line with their thinking.
Yes, we took a look at Penn State's policy. They have a person in charge of drones on campus, a manager, I believe.
Yeah, and Justin shared with us, there's a lot of restrictions at parks, and there's only
Right.
in certain designated areas and state parks or other places that you're allowed to do it. So,
But, I mean, again, this also says model airplanes, which is
What's this model?
is different than a drone, I think. And it may be that it's not.
If it's your decision.
It's a UAS, though.
The thinking we had in designing this was, I don't care where you bought it, how big it is. I don't care if you call it a model airplane or a drone or an X-Man machine or whatever. If somebody flies it into a group of people on district property,
It's a problem.
that could end poorly.
Okay, I'm fine with that. It's the clarity of it that I want to make sure we're with.
Word that comes to mind for this, parsimonious. We're trying to find a parsimonious definition that doesn't involve a lot of extraneous language and options. and
Well,
stuff.
we
It's just
did
something-
eliminate a lot.
Right.
Are there any other questions or discussion on 815.9? Yes.
So, a person, Sven, our neighbor, who's in charge of such things, right? If he was like, you know what, I want to go over to Community Field and fly my drone, he can't do that.
Correct.
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 Now, if it's summertime and nobody's around and he goes over and flies it anyway, are we going to have somebody specifically patrol the grounds to make sure that doesn't happen? Of course not. That's
Yeah,
not
but it
practical.
would still violate
But we
policy.
will take a look, but we will be very careful about when there are groups of people outside.
Nope. It's all right. I think there should be a carve out for Community Field.
All right, we're good.
I want to know what happens when someone brings a 75-pound drone.
Justin?
It's not allowed.
It's not allowed.
It's not
There's
allowed.
No drones.
Justin?
Yeah.
Where does it say that?
What about a 75-pound drone?
It's a
So
helicopter.
I didn't specifically cover those because they require a different license. That like you have to actually, just for clarity, so any drone under 55 pounds has to be registered. So the license is separate from a registration. Any drone that anyone owns is supposed to be registered with the FAA. The license comes into play with once you exceed a certain weight or depending on your use. So for example, like our teachers have to register the drones or become a pilot because we're not using them recreationally. We're using them in an instructional setting. Or like if you're using them for business, you have to have the pilot license. So I was focused more on the unmanned aircraft system. A drone over 55 pounds does not classify as that, so it has a different FAA classification. And there would probably be a lot of laws related to them flying something like that on public airspace, so I didn't cover it.
Thanks, that's helpful to know.
All right. Any other questions on the drone policy? So we're good to bring it for action? Finally? All right. One more.
And we have 828, fraud. Again, this is a new policy. Coincidentally, PSBA came out from it, and in our last audit, we were asked to have a fraud policy by the auditors, so good timing. This is basically what PSBA said. We made very few changes to it during the committee meeting.
Are there any questions on policy 828? All right. Let's bring it for action.
And that one on as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, Linda. All right, next we have an update on the district-wide facilities master plan. Mr. Brown and Mr. Fisher will be joining us for this review.
Thank you. I think this is fairly straightforward. Again, what I will preface with is that we do not have a full scope meaning a detailed, step-by-step, what each step of the process will look like. And we would expect that we would work with the architect as well, which in this case is recommended that it would be Crabtree Rohrbaugh again, to identify scope. And unless we have received significant reservations from the board this evening, we have another planning meeting scheduled with Crabtree Rohrbaugh to get a head start on this before the next board meeting, which is when we would expect that a recommendation would be approved. This is the modeling that we have proposed thus far is following that undertaken with the primarily from the high school district-wide master plan, or the master plan completed just before the high school project was started. There was a master plan update completed for the 3 elementary projects. However, it was much more constrained and a much more focused update, similar to our facilities analysis and attendance boundary analysis that was most recently completed that we talked about earlier this evening. So just wanted to reiterate the administration's recommendation and our findings. What you find it is a draft, it should say draft fee proposal for you, pending further conversation about scope for this project. But I believe that as I've spoken to at least several of you, if not in for full board sessions, I see this, we see this as an administration as a 3-part master plan update. One will include facility assessments, Energy Star benchmarking for sustainability, and I'm sorry, I'm going off of their fee schedule. Let me start over again. Facilities analysis will be driving a Park Forest Middle School project. The high school is obviously fairly new. Several of our elementary schools are fairly new. Our oldest building is going to be Park Forest Middle School, or is at Park Forest Middle School. We continue to do renovations and deferred maintenance at Mount Nittany Middle School. So the largest facility project expected to arise from the district-wide facility master plan would be Park Forest Middle School. Then there would be a sustainability initiative in this process where we would look at all of our buildings, trying to get a third-party review and input on our deferred maintenance and capital projects for areas of synergy for replacing and updating our buildings, maintaining our buildings in a sustainable, all the while in a sustainable nature. A greenhouse gas inventory would be completed in that. We'd also look at our transportation services in our sustainability initiative, and keeping in mind that could lead to, depending on the future of our number of buses that we maintain, a new transportation facility, which has not been thus far in our master plan, capital financing plan. And then the final part would be looking at our athletics and playground facilities. We started updating some playgrounds with our last 3 elementary projects. We want to couple all of these 3 phases together because there can be some synergy and some economies of scale by doing so. And then what I envision coming out of that will be some prioritization of projects, looking for different financing mechanisms, our capital reserve fund, use of borrowings, as well as different grants and federal and state funding opportunities. There is again, an estimated fee proposal here from Crabtree. And so I would suspect that we would prefer to bring to you two similar actions as we did tonight related to the Mount Nittany Elementary project. And that would be your direction to move forward with a district-wide facility master plan process. You may have a desire to have more information, more scope, more steps before or after that action is taken. And then also a recommendation to engage with Crabtree Rohrbaugh along with us in that project. I think it goes worth saying as a reminder for the community, for those that may be watching, those that may be coming upon this agenda that don't have a lot of experience or knowledge with district capital matters, that Crabtree Rohrbaugh was assigned to and contracted for our high school project prior to the district winning the second successful referendum in the state for building projects. And then because of a very short window of time that some PlanCon, which is the reimbursement mechanism that the state provides funding for school districts that are completing capital projects, opened up while we were in the middle of one of the largest high school projects in the state. We took on 3 more projects, being 3 elementary schools, and the board did agree to engage with Crabtree Rohrbaugh, and we felt that was a very successful avenue, and so that's why earlier recommendation this evening that you acted upon and approved was to engage with them on Mount Nittany Elementary School. And again, that is why we would recommend engaging with them for this project. There is a lot of synergy in working with consultants that you already are familiar with, as well as if you're working on multiple capital projects at the same time, there is additional synergy by working with the same firm on those multiple projects. But I think that covers everything. Mike, was there anything that you thought we should mention that I might have missed over?
Just to reiterate the scope, still very much in the air about how deep of a dive we want to go with facility condition assessments, greenhouse gas inventory, sustainability initiatives, that sort of thing, and understanding what the cost impact of some of those deeper dives are. We obviously have the PDE requirements on kind of our instructional phase 1. It's outlined in the bullet points on page 1 of the memo. And then after that, it's really that's what we need to kind of hash out, is what that scope looks like and what the cost impacts would be.
Yeah, and pardon me if I don't know if my brain went somewhere else while you were covering this. There's also then at the top of page 2, a security mention of a security evaluation. I think that you omitted that when you said that.
Did not speak to that, but yes,
Yeah.
that's very important as well.
Yeah.
And it's already been included in many of our projects.
Yep.
But I think that recent events and recent requirements by the state make it all the more important. And that's why we've been working with our resource officers to work with this on from their viewpoint, but also bringing someone who's focusing on that every day. And then they will also work with our resource officers and local law enforcement and as we would make any recommendations and prepare for any projects. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I just want to say, in the conversations that I've had with and emails, so much communication with so many parents, that's a thing. Security, safety of students comes up in any number of ways from across the community, from our youngest kids to parents of our oldest children. And I think that we just want to be really clear that we want to incorporate that into our scope of work. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Randy.
I just had out of curiosity, what is the status of the PlanCon reimbursement program? Does it exist anymore? Is it funded?
It's not funded, no.
Okay.
Anything, obviously, any approved projects prior to the funding ending are still being reimbursed, just like some of
Right.
ours.
Yeah.
But there is no available funding. However,
You still have to do the process.
we would recommend that we would still do the process. An Act 34 hearing is still required for projects with a, I believe it's 20% scope of the building. And so we would highly suggest that we follow that Plan-Con process as a guide for us to get to the Act 34 hearing.
Okay, thanks.
And just in case the state comes up with money, we could possibly be in the pipeline.
Maybe from those billions of dollars, the surplus, the billions of dollars.
Those code bills might happen. Deb.
I understand the efficiencies associated with going with Crabtree, but I just want to ask like a couple of hypothetical questions. If we wanted to consider changing architects, does it make more sense to do an RFP for architects for the district-wide facilities master plan, or to wait until you were doing it for Park Forest? Like, if we choose somebody now for the master plan, does that guarantee that we use that architect for Park Forest Middle School? But are we going to hear the same argument again? Well, they've done all this other stuff, so it would be a lot easier if we just kept going, right? And then when is the appropriate time to take a step back and think, do we want to consider a different architect? Because there will never not be this synergy.
Correct.
But sometimes it is helpful to take a step back and look. And I don't know what we did, because I wasn't on the board then, before the last big one before the high school. So,
That was when your last change of architects occurred.
okay.
And although it does not guarantee, I personally would think that it makes more sense to change at the master planning process. Because I believe that there are huge amounts of synergy in working with Crabtree right now. However, if you go through a master plan process and you start doing some designs, because you have to do some preliminary designs to be able to come up with cost estimates of what you can afford.
Right.
And so we're going to be doing that for a Park Forest project, and then we're going to need to be doing that for deferred maintenance and capital improvements for our other projects. There's some assumptions there. And so I believe that it now would be the time, if the board desires to at least engage in a process, then it would be now and not later.
Thank
You have
you.
the district's recommendation, but yes,
Yeah.
I think that's a very fair and open and honest question to ask.
And just as a quick follow-up then, if the board decided that we wanted to consider making a change for the facilities master plan, how much extra time do we think that builds into the process? Like, how long does it take to go through the RFP and choose?
3 months?
I'd say probably 3 months.
Okay.
And with that, I think it can be done. It'll add time to the administration to help. We're going to have to, instead of partnering with an architect to define the scope that we would like, we're going to have to define that scope up front.
Right.
And probably work with some consultant to help us cross the Ts and dot the Is, make sure we're not missing something.
That's helpful, thanks. I just haven't been part of the process before, so it's helped us to understand it.
Yeah.
Dan, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say, in looking through these tasks, I'm reminded of the activity during the design phase or the planning phase for the high school when Crabtree was involved. Looking at these tasks sound like the kinds of tasks that you'd want to, through which you want to get a commitment from an architect to go forward with the whole project. So these kinds of things, I think, that are listed under the facilities master plan would be the kind of thing, if we're going to switch horses, this would be, we would do it now rather than wait till later.
I can add, I think it's feasible as we get into this district-wide facilities master plan has a lot of aspects to it. There's a lot of different facets, a lot of moving pieces, and I would suspect that although Crabtree's a very capable architect, there's probably pieces of this that it's not really in their wheelhouse. So I think we would have the flexibility to say, hey, we need to go out and find somebody else for some of these subparts that are kind of specialized. So make sure that we have the best possible people out there working on, their specialty.
And I think that most firms that we would bring in would do that same team. They'd be bringing a team, and just like Crabtree did when we did the previous district-wide facility master plan, as well as then the actual individual projects.
I also want to say that Crabtree has become what other architects are striving for. And just visiting another school district or high school who administration came to visit our schools, basically took that design and everything that we had in there and built it using this other architect firm. But it looks pretty much, I mean, thought we walked into State High when we were there. So I just want to let you know that, what Crabtree has accomplished is being basically implemented by other architects, other places. So when we're talking about Crabtree, it's a good bang for your buck.
Gretchen.
Yeah, actually, Laurel and I had a long conversation about this earlier today, and she heard everything I had to say. So if anybody wants to reach out to Laurel or to me about this, I'm happy to do it in a conversation. But in a nutshell, since I've been on the board, I've sat on interviews with other firms, and I have been a part of working on another project with a different architect, and it was very, very different than working with Crabtree. In addition to that, the Park Forest community has been contacting me personally when I was chair of facilities, and Peter, since he's been chair of facilities, well, now we're co-chairs. For a long time, just on the time issue, and we're regularly sent photos of the dilapidated building, and there's been health issues from the air, and normally I don't prioritize speediness when I don't think it's necessary, and this time, in my opinion, it is necessary, and we have an obligation and a duty to that part of our community to try to get this done sooner rather than later, is how I worded it to Laurel. So even 3 months, and it's a good guess, but it could be even longer. And the relationships that SCASD, people like Randy, have with Crabtree are really significant, especially nowadays when it is so difficult. And I know this from my work with the COG and CRPR, and also through facilities projects here in the district, that things are taking a lot longer now than before COVID. And the relationship that SCASD has with Crabtree would really help us in that regard because of those relationships. When Randy calls them, they answer and they get back to him. Correct me if I'm wrong, Randy.
No, you're correct.
And that is not a guarantee if we go down the road of another RFP process. I made like 10 other points to Laurel, but, there are, and then I've also heard what Dr. Johnson just said from I remember Dr. O'Donnell saying similar things, that Crabtree is really, a lot of districts are working with them for these specific reasons. Also, supply chain issues, it's not as bad as it used to be, but it still is happening, as Randy talked about earlier. And, pushing things in any way that's going to take longer for the Park Forest Middle School project is not something that I, as one board member, would support. That community really needs this to happen sooner rather than later. And thank you so much to Randy and Mike for prioritizing this and, getting this process going for us to have on discussion right now. And hopefully we can move this along and really get this done. And Crabtree has done it on time and on budget, and we have had so many projects, and the quality, we can ask Mike but I've already heard people ask Mike this before, has been very good. And we have not seen lots and lots of problems happening from the work that they have been a part of. So I'll stop at that, and I'm happy to talk to anybody. Go for a walk, go for a coffee, answer emails about this, but this is something that I just don't think that we need to go down a path where we're going to prolong this and possibly, I would say probably, get a worse product. I'll leave it at that.
I'll come back to you in a minute, but I just want to see if anyone else has.
Yeah, sure.
Amy, do you have anything?
No, I think Gretchen's point is a really valid one. RFP processes, particularly with our board, frequently take more like 6 months because of the wealth of questions and, yeah, for a variety of reasons. So I think 3 months is aspirational. I think 6 months on an RFP is probably more realistic. And I concur that the Park Forest community has been deferred quite long enough. And not only do they deserve an adequate facility, but I mean, it's on us to keep the students and the staff and faculty safe. And so that means getting this project done in a timely manner. So I agree.
Laurel.
Thanks. Yeah, we did have a very, very good conversation. I appreciate Gretchen's input, and I'll share some of what my concerns are. First, to start with a question, how much ballpark? I know this isn't the capital projects update, but currently, remind us what we are guessing we have that we could pay for the Park Forest project.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
How much that we have built up that we are expecting that we can spend on the Park Forest
There's
project?
about 60 to 65 million in our capital reserve fund right now.
Okay, so, but that's not borrow, we could still borrow.
Yes.
Yeah. So that last project, the one before the high school, and Jim may know more about this, I can't remember when you first came on the board. That happened before I was even really paying attention to the board, 2008. One thing I will say about this proposal, having gone back and looked, is that the price tag for that master planning project was over $100,000 more than the price tag just for that beginning part here, just for the district-wide master planning. Unfortunately, what that tells me is that we need to figure out what we're really doing, because that big a discrepancy when you're talking about that budget being back in 2008 says that we may be talking about different scopes, different types of projects. That project took, I think, 9 months, I wrote, from July 2008 to April 2009, involved 5 community meetings, 3 community dialogues, a very large steering committee, and was really a very, very comprehensive look that has charted the path till now. Some of that.
That was the DeYoung.
Right,
effort,
and that was,
right, or
yes.
DeYoung. Right.
And also looking back, that, I don't know how long the RFP process took. From what I could find, there were 5 firms that were considered, interviewed before that one was chosen. So that's a very big difference from this. I hear the urgency. I've asked about it constantly because we have moved it on our timeline. At the same time, my nightmare scenario would be that we move ahead, that we wind up with something that is a design that we would have to either go to referendum or do such heavy borrowing that the board that's facing that would know they needed to get community buy-in. And that community would say, well, these guys have done it forever. Why didn't you even look at another group? I think that would be a legitimate question at that point. And again, someone asked me today, I think, Jackie, do I think Crabtree's done a bad job? No, I'm not saying it's because of displeasure with Crabtree. I'm talking about the transparency and ensuring that we can have a full look at what we're doing. I also think that Crabtree, because of the things you've mentioned, the synergies and all that, would come in lower probably because they don't have to build in as much time and as much money to actually getting us to there. But the idea of moving forward is when it's been since 2008 since we last did this. And the world has changed a lot. As best I can tell, and someone else may know, I haven't been able to find it, the Mount Nittany Middle School opened in 1995, and I assume that before that there was a similar, very deep dive look comprehensively at the whole way the district operates. Charter schools, private schools, other types of programs that may be mandated or that are no longer required. We no longer put typing rooms into buildings. So it seems to me that once every 15 or 20 years to take that very deep dive makes sense. And if we're going to do it, this would be the time to do it. And I don't think we should do that without at least hearing from other firms.
Laurel, if I could just add, I think that what Jim said when you talked about a 2008, that was a different firm.
Right.
And then since that point in time, then there was interviews again.
Right, for 3.
When Crabtree was selected. So I wanted to make
Oh,
sure
yeah.
that, I didn't hear all of that, so I wanted to
Sorry.
make sure that no, that's fine. And, I don't know off the top of my head what all of those different cost factors are. I do believe that this scenario would, obviously, it does include sustainability and playgrounds and athletic fields in a different way than has been, that wasn't included in it with the same type of a scope as it was in the past. The 2008 scenario did build in we were talking about basically every building except Mount Nittany Middle School at that point in time, and financing for all of those. And so I do think that, and the last thing I'll say is that if I would recommend if you want to look to make a change, you do it now with the master plan. However, if you get a product that you're less than pleased with, or the board is less than pleased with at that time, it doesn't mandate that the architect had to be the same architect than it was for the master plan. A change could happen at a later date as well. So, and I just wanted to go on record saying that I didn't say the opposite. I'm just preferring that if you make a change, if there's board support to make a change, that I think it would make more sense now, but it wouldn't have to be now either.
But I would add to that we could also go, if for some reason we didn't go with Crabtree, we could come back to them for the architect.
You're
Because I
absolutely
think
right.
you're right. The processes are different, and from what I could tell from what you gave us in this, the first part, the 2008 part, was closer to the part 1 in here. And then where Crabtree came in on the high school, I think, was closer to part 2, which is the ed spec, even though they didn't do it, all of that stuff. So that first, the district-wide piece
Right.
was that big thing.
Right.
Dr. Kravic, do you have anything you want to say?
No, I kind of agree with some of the statements that I heard, and I think it's a good idea that we are discussing this, because I think also the community would like to know why we picked one over the other. And some of the positive things that were said about Crabtree, I didn't know. So I think I'm thankful for that. But I do also think that, it is good to look at other firms. So that's all.
Yeah, so I'll come back to you right after I say this, but I just wanted to say, when I was reflecting on this and I thought about all the town halls we had that were led by Tom Templeton, and one of the first questions he asked is, what do people think SCASD does really well? And one of the things we always heard, in every single meeting, was facilities. Our community is really proud of the facilities we have here, and they seem to be really happy with them. And just to add to Mr. Johnson's point, the Commonwealth Court case, I can't tell you how many times they put a picture of our high school up on the projector during that court case, because they wanted to there were a lot of different points being made, but it was an exemplar, here is a facility of a beautiful school. That is why it was put up. And so for me, if we have a good working relationship with them, and that can streamline things in our administrative staff, then I think I would support just going to Crabtree. So, Peter.
Yeah, I was just, I appreciate all the comments. I think this is really important. It's really good for the public to see us, asking these questions. Randy's comments about, the synergy, right, experience. And I also, I think a healthy skepticism about, a firm that we've worked with for a while is really good, because, if they become complacent, they're going to become lazy. If they're lazy, they're not going to be accountable. If they're not accountable, then we might not be totally transparent about things, and onward and onward. In an age of pretty heavy distrust of institutions, right? I think that it's really important for us to be pretty clear about all of the reasoning. And, for me, I think about, competition will breed imagination, period. It will do that. Do we want to delay or disrupt? Do we want to delay something that we know could go faster, knowing that it can disrupt a relationship with a firm that has won multiple awards? We have 3 LEED Platinum buildings with this group, 2 LEED Gold buildings, right? We would have a consistent aesthetic. And in my discussions with them, and in some other venues, they're really good. When I was a member of the public showing up, at these integrative design things, they took the feedback, they modified design. And that's a level of responsiveness that is not true in lots and lots of firms. I think that's really exceptional. And I think that, the board basically has to decide, like, do you want to open this up for competition with imagination, knowing that it's going to delay and that there's a very high chance that they would win anyway, right? Or do we want to do something that I think we all have very good reason to know will work probably very well, And I don't want to shoot the known very, very good for the sake of some hypothetical perfect. That just doesn't make good sense to me. But, if that were to be the will of the board to open it up for a request for proposals, then it is well within our purview to do. I just don't think it's probably the best way to go.
And as I'm sitting here as the finance officer, it behooves me to mention they're not the most expensive.
And we have contracted with them during years when we have very clear audits.
Correct.
Right? So these things are not disconnected from each other. All of that is traceable.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because Randy, what were the 2 Schrader schools came in at? Wasn't it Schrader?
I don't want to.
Okay, well, that's true. My anecdote, my sense is what I recall is
They were more expensive than they needed to be.
they were more expensive than they needed to be, and I think more expensive than we thought they were going to be, and I think they might have been on par with what we got many, many, many years later in terms of costs. So,
Yes.
just as a point of context for those who weren't on the board, the Ferguson building and the Mount Ninny L was done. They were the more recent elementary buildings that were done.
Right.
And that was part of. It was interesting to hear the comments on the design, because what I remember hearing was that was part of the concern about Schrader, and the concern about Crabtree was that, oh, well, they don't have a sophisticated design. I think that part of they've gotten much better at that. I mean, I don't think anyone could look at these schools and think, oh, well, that's just a rectangular box. And I think that's what people's concerns was. Correct me if I'm wrong. People were concerned that's what we'd get with Crabtree, that we might get a lower cost, but it would be like a boring old building. We did not get that. We got a very, like you said, it's an exemplar building aesthetically and other ways, so.
Buildings.
Yes, I meant specifically the high school, which is when the decision was made.
Gotcha.
So you need direction tonight.
Yeah, if you are not willing to entertain these as 2 separate motions on your September 11th meeting, then I would like to have that direction so that we can go make our preparations in a different manner.
And could you summarize the two motions one more time for us?
I think that the one would be to authorize the administration to begin the workings of a district-wide facility master plan process, and the second would be to engage with Crabtree on that district-wide facility master plan process.
All right, thank you.
Jackie, it seems to me that we may even right now be able to give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down on the question of an RFP, because I think that's what's hanging in the balance here. And Peter, I want to tell you, you had me with the transparency argument, because I really do feel that there is that element to this in terms of the community, in terms of what we're doing, in terms of whether or not we, in an open way, evaluate different options, professional options in terms of architectural services. And we do that before we move, in my view, before we move ahead with the master planning process. But I think maybe we could get a sense right now of where members of the board are with this, so that we can give Randy some guidance in terms of what we're doing. I'm just suggesting that to the group. I'm just one of 9.
So we just go around the table. What should we do?
So, yeah, I feel no need for an RFP.
Okay.
I would support the 2 motions that Randy suggested.
Me too.
You would support the 2 motions? Just being clear. Gretchen?
Same.
I would also support the 2 motions.
Definitely would support the first motion. I'm not sure I would support the second motion.
So you're more RFP pro,
Yeah.
leaning towards an RFP.
Yeah.
That's where I would be too. I think we absolutely should start working towards a master plan. But an RFP, I think, is at least worth considering. One thing, and I'll just mention, because I mentioned it to Gretchen, that if the recommendation is to hire Crabtree for all of this, one thing that would help is some very current prices from places that have done other things, so that we could at least show that this is, what we're looking at is reasonable.
Prices for these services or prices for architectural services?
I would
And
guess
the
both.
building.
I remember the memos that said, this is what recent projects have cost that Schrader has, including ours, that, and I don't need to get into the name of the companies, but that this company has done and this company has done, and now look at Crabtree. So we got fairly current data on what things cost with other people, with other firms.
We can certainly take a look at that. It's going to be tough getting apples to apples. I'll just say it now, just because of the scope, all the scope items. And I hear, one thing I just to mention, I hear the board talking a lot about Park Forest Middle School, and that's certainly everybody's concern as kind of our phase 1 instructional piece of this. But in mind, this is a district-wide facilities master plan, right? So it's Park Forest is obviously probably our greatest concern, but it's still it's a district-wide.
Dr. Duffy?
I think that I would like a process that would affirm for us that Crabtree represents the best set of services, best value, and I'm not into the dollars and cents of this, but I think we'd be good to open it up to other potential, to the competition, to see what we might learn from this. Now, I think the decision has already been made by the board, I mean, at this point, where we are. But, so I'll just throw that in just for good measure, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, what Dan just said, it doesn't actually really matter, because there's 5 people that already said they would support Crabtree. But I think this, although long, was a useful conversation. I know I started it by asking the questions. I wasn't even particularly opposed to Crabtree when I asked the questions. I just wanted to know what the process was. And I think it's important to balance the costs and the benefits, right? And the synergy and the moving forward and the not losing 3 to 6 months, when we might end up with the same decision anyway, is certainly persuasive. And we've been happy with their services. So I'm happy with Crabtree. I don't see the need to go forward, but I also wouldn't fight it if the will of the board was to do the RFP.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I'm staying. You're leaving.
Don't move, Randy.
We still have you. I said sneak away.
This is, we saved the best for last, in my opinion. I love this. So, our last information item tonight is an update on the 2023-2024 state budget. And Randy will give us some information about that.
So I'm not going to regurgitate this whole memo, although it's not very long. But I will say that, I just as a reminder, that the state budget was signed by Governor Shapiro in early August. However, one of the things that is, so there's some goods and some bads. The goods are, we know where the majority of the state revenue that we receive is coming from and in what amounts. For example, basic education funding, we are getting more there. The front page does include the increases for the specific line items in total for all districts, and then the back is our summary. But there are some pieces that the final amounts and distributions have not been determined. Fortunately for us, those are not significant dollar amounts for us. Again, talking about the things that are important to our students and our families tangibly, free breakfast will continue, but it's continuing at the state level. And then students identified as eligible for reduced price lunches will continue to be free for at least another year. So I'm sure that many of you are, if not all of us, are very happy about that as well.
Yeah,
So-
and that's a change for us, right, Randy? Because we were raising funds and seeking funds to pay off that amount, whereas the state now will be paying off that
That is
amount.
correct.
So that's a gain.
That is correct. On page 2 of the document, as shown on the screen, basic education, we are expecting about $12.5 million, which is $1.9 million more than we had budgeted. And then special education is $3.5 million, which is about $52,000 more than we had budgeted. And the Act 1 budget process does allow for school districts to do a budget reopener should the state revenue be finalized in the budget after the school district has approved their budget, which you obviously did in the beginning of June. Many years, even when we are eligible to reopen the budget, we aren't necessarily in the position that we need to. However, given the size of this difference, the new dollars available, and the some of the sensitive items and important items that were not addressed and can be now addressed in state funding, we are preparing, the administration is going to be preparing for you a budget reopener for the September the 11th meeting. In that time, we will have some new or expanded opportunities for our students in that budget reopener, and we'll have more information about that for you at that time. So I will say that this is going to be a new process not only for Joe Viglione, but also for Randy Brown, because I've never had to reopen a budget.
So exciting.
And it's not that, it's just a combination of many things. But I hope that you all feel that it's appropriate and are accepting of those items when we bring those forward to you.
Great. Randy, quick question. In previous years, at that time when we would resolve our budget with decision by the state in terms of our subsidy, those additional funds sometimes might be redirected to capital reserve, pretty much 100%. But I hear something different now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but do I hear you saying that we're going to return to some of our past identified needs or priorities that didn't make it into the budget that now we can consider in terms of programming or support for kids or whatever that we wouldn't otherwise?
I believe that we're in a time where we have some items that we did not address,
right,
as well as some items that have come up even as recent as the summer since you approved your budget,
great,
that we believe are appropriate to invest in.
Okay. So instructional or intervention-based kinds of things?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all, just checking.
It'll, details.
Just checking. I hate to be, I don't want dollars and cents now, just with some general idea.
Since we have 3 weeks till our next board meeting because of the Labor Day holiday, and this will be new information, we will try to get this information out to you as early as possible, more than just a couple days prior to the meeting. But we have several pieces of conversation that we need to have in order to do that.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Brown. Looking ahead to future meetings, we have our next Committee of the Whole regular board meeting on September 11th at 7 p.m. here in Panorama Village Administration Center boardroom. Followed the following week, by the September 18th, 2023 regular board meeting. Also at 7 p.m. here at Panorama Village Administration Center. And then on September 19th, 2023, we'll have a policy development committee here in Panorama Village Administration Center in the boardroom at 1:30 p.m. I would now like to call for a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. All right, thank you very much.